The name George J. Gottwald is not a household name. There's no reason it should be. He was a parish priest in the Ozarks and apparently a very simple and devout man. In the early 60s, he was named Auxiliary Bishop of St. Louis. And then in 1967, upon the death of the Cardinal Archbishop, he was named Apostolic Administrator of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. And just to put that in context, an apostolic administrator is kind of like a substitute teacher. So you got responsibility, but you don't have all of the authority or all of the respect. And so that's what he walks into, this very simple priest. And of course, this is the late 60s, very turbulent years for society and for the church. And during his time as apostolic administrator, a crisis erupted in the Archdiocesan Seminary. Many of the faculty and even of the students had walked out. And at one point, those remaining began a protest and insisted that the apostolic administrator come to receive their list of demands. Of course, the press was also there. This was a situation that Bishop Gottwald was completely unprepared for. Few bishops would be. When he arrived, the faculty and the students gathered. They insisted that everything had changed, that everything was up for grabs. Nothing was solid or lasting. There was no point to continue the whole project of theology and education for the priesthood. Then they waited as he paused to recollect himself and to answer them. This story, which I heard 30 years ago in the seminary, has come to my mind often because I think it kind of describes the situation that a lot of us priests and teachers find ourselves. Like Bishop Gottwald, we didn't sign up for controversy. Just wanted to teach a Catholic environment, to form young minds, to convey the gospel, to build up Catholic schools. We wanted to hand on the truth and beauty of math, of science, of history, of literature, and of art. And now we find ourselves amid controversies that we didn't anticipate regarding technology, sexuality, family, and so on. And what faces us now is a crisis about the meaning and therefore about the dignity of the human person. So much so that last spring, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith issued a declaration entitled Dignitas Infinita, Infinite Dignity, on the dignity of the human person. The title is a poetic line from St. John Paul II, meant to capture the truth that the human person possesses unique dignity in every circumstance. The declaration was promulgated not only because of the manifold abuses and violations of human dignity throughout the world, but also because of false ideas about human dignity. Now, it's always good to reflect on human dignity. Today, I'd like to reflect on it as regards your participation in the Church's mission of education and formation. The truth and dignity of the human person is a foundational principle for all that we do in Catholic education. So, Joe Vorbach asked me to speak on this. Father, would you be the keynote? It was kind of a slow rollout. Would you be the keynote speaker? I would be honored to. Thank you. That's a great honor. Would you address human dignity, AI, and transgender ideology in 45 minutes? Be thorough and succinct. So, with this time, we'll consider the dignity of the human person. What are we, and why is it that we have dignity? Then, in light of that, we'll consider those two challenges of AI and transgender ideology, and then also consider an opportunity. So first, the dignity of the human person. So I suspect that we're all familiar with the phrase, the dignity of the human person. But why is it that we have dignity? Where does it come from? People assert it, but it's kind of a hard sell, to be honest. When you consider what's been called man's inhumanity to man, it's hard to argue that we have an innate dignity, which is precisely why the church needs to give witness to it. This dignity is capable of being known by human reason, but as we all know, our reason can quickly become rationalization. We are able to perceive, but we're also able to misperceive. We're also able to justify, to conceal, and to overlook. The role of the church, as Pope Benedict frequently said, is to purify reason by the light of revelation. And that's shown, I think, especially in this area of the dignity of the human person. So to understand and appreciate human dignity, we need to know what the human person is. We have dignity according to what we are. Vatican II has this wonderful quote, "Man is the only creature on earth which God willed for itself," meaning we are not means to an end. We are not cogs in the machinery of the state or of the economy. God willed each one of us, each one of you, for your own sake, meaning because he wanted each one of us to exist. We could say it in this way: God loved us into existence, which every time I say that, it sounds like a Hallmark card greeting, right? You open the card, God loved you into existence. But that is actually just a very stark, cold, theological truth. God loved you into existence. He created us so that we can be with him. So our dignity comes from the fact that we come from God and are meant for God. That is the ground of our dignity. It's something bestowed by the Creator. It's not achieved by us. It's not achieved by our GPA or our resume or our trophies. It's not something granted to us by a government, which also means that it cannot be lost or taken away. Now, this dignity exists in a particular kind of being, and that is the human person. What is this thing? What is this being that has dignity? There's a quote from a document from the 70s, Persona Humana. "There can be no true promotion of man's dignity unless the essential order of his nature is respected." So what is this order of his nature? What are we? What goes into making up who we are? What are the things that make us these creatures imbued with dignity? If we know these things, if we know those things that make us human, then we know what to defend and what to promote. And we know what to reject. If we know these elements of who we are, then we know how to respond to the various challenges before us. These give us sort of a filter by which we can filter the challenges before us. We know how to address them. We know what promotes our dignity and what takes away from it. Now, usually priests, when they give you a list, they give you a list in sets of threes, right? It's like the three-point homily is a classic. Today, I'm going to do something very courageous. I'm going to give you a list of 6. 5 parts in each. No, so here are 6 things that we can perceive by reason, but we also draw from divine revelation, and specifically from the book of Genesis. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are things that are essential to who we are and help us to understand our human dignity. So the first one is, we are created. And that might seem to be obvious, but it isn't so much anymore. Because now we think that we can object to our created status and that we can change what we have received at our own creation. That we are created means that we receive what we are. We don't create ourselves. We don't get to invent a new human nature. We have to be content to be creatures and therefore to be created. So Dignitas Infinita says, we do not create our nature. We hold it as a gift, and we can nurture, develop, and enhance our abilities. By exercising the freedom to cultivate the riches of our nature, we grow over time. Second, we're created in the image and likeness of God. So not created like other creatures that we find in the world, but created in a unique manner. Created in the image and likeness of God, which means, first of all, that we don't understand ourselves by way of ourselves alone. To understand ourselves, we have to appreciate the one whose image we are. That we're created in the image and likeness of God means that we have an intellect and a will, the capacity to know and the capacity to choose, and most of all, the capacity to love. And our human intellect and will, these are earthly approximations and images of the divine intellect and will. We are basically his images or his icons, his viceroys in the world, representatives of the God who knows and loves. It's like when you go into a church or to a school, I think, or a rectory office, you'll see a picture of the Pope and a picture of the bishop, right? And it's to show that, well, we are, under the jurisdiction both of Pope Francis and of Bishop Burbage. Interesting, not a picture of the pastor, but we'll just leave that for now. But it's sort of, in a sense, they are exercising their work through the work of the people there. And each one of us is to be that for God in the world, to be his image. He is exercising his work in the world by way of us. And just by the way, so far, these first two aspects of the human person, we've gotten through the first two questions of the old Baltimore Catechism. Who made you? God made me. Why did he make you? To know, love, and serve him in this world, so as to be happy with him in the next. Those two questions just that were planted in the minds of so many students get to the heart of things very quickly, and they resolve a lot of problems very quickly. Third, we're embodied creatures. This image and likeness of God is both physical and spiritual. That is, our bodies and our souls are not opposed to one another, although they don't always get along, and they're not linked together for no reason. The human body and soul form one organism, one being. The soul is what theologians call the form of the body. It gives life to the body. And the body is the sacrament or the outward sign of the soul. And so we read in Genesis, then the Lord God formed the man out of the dust of the ground. And I love this image. You've got God there forming man out of the dust of the ground. He's like, kid at the beach, making something. There's a physical dimension to who we are. And in every age, there have been those who have scorned the material dimension of creation in general and of the human person in particular. The church has always resisted that and pushed back against those who would demean the human body in the material world. We should never scorn the physical or the material. We should receive it, rather. It's a gift from God. And then Genesis continues. He blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And so there you have God breathing the breath of life into Adam. This is the spiritual dimension of the human person. It comes not from the physical, but from God himself. And this is primarily where the image and likeness of God resides, meaning that our resemblance to him is, first of all, spiritual. But because the body is the sacrament of the soul, that image and likeness of God is outwardly conveyed. It is as embodied beings, both spiritual and physical, that we are the image of God. Now, I want to linger on this a little bit because it's at the heart of so many challenges in our culture. And Dignitas Infinita says, constituting the person's being, the soul and the body both participate in the dignity that characterizes every human. So our souls are not ghosts in the machine, as a modern phrase has it. Our bodies are not meat suits, as another modern phrase has it. Our souls are not spirits rattling around in bodies, just waiting to be freed, and our bodies are not prisons for our souls. These are all errors of the ancient and of the modern world, and of every era in between. Reason and revelation teach us something different. To be human is to be a body-soul union, one organism, physical and spiritual, and our dignity resides in that person, body and soul. Fourth, we're persons, which means not just that we're individuals, but that we're created for community. A person is one who is meant to be in relation with others. God is three persons, and we, as his image and likeness, are meant to reflect that in our personal relationships. We all know that one of the greatest problems today is loneliness. Some of that comes from the way we've structured our society, but some of that comes from bad ideas in our culture that see society as an infringement on our freedom and potential. This is at the heart of a lot of modern philosophers, that society is somehow a concession, that we lose something of ourselves when we enter into society. But drawing on Revelation, the church has always taught that no, we are created for community. And we only realize our fulfillment and our full potential when we are in relation with others. The human person cannot be human except in relation to other persons. And it's there that we really live out our dignity. Fifth, we're created male and female. The book of Genesis is unlike most any other ancient creation account because it presents the work of creation as that of a knowing and loving creator. And this applies to the distinction of the human person as man and woman, male and female. It's not an accident. It's not a punishment. It is the deliberate choice of a loving God to sort of embody his image and likeness in this person as male and female. Man and woman are created equal and alike, but not absolutely the same. The sameness and the difference are ordered towards union, not towards conflict. And this is what we call complementarity. It is good to be female, to be a woman. It is good to be male, to be a man. This is Adam's, the first recorded words of man, right? Adam's response to Eve. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." And by the way, that's a pun, right? If you open up your Bible and look at that verse, it might have a footnote explaining the play on words from woman and man. Man's first words are a pun, kind of a dad joke, right? You might explain what happens later, right? But really, more importantly, it's a hymn of praise. It's a poem. It's a hymn, just rejoicing that Adam has found someone who is like him, but also who is different than he is, and so draws him out of himself. What precedes this is a line that was on the prior slide. It is not good that the man should be alone, which I think is one of the funniest lines in Scripture, because most men kind of like to be left alone, right? And keep in mind, Adam was placed in a garden. He had yard work. And he was like, "No, this is good. I'm fine." But it's a profound statement. It is not good that a man or that man should be alone. We are created for community, and that first community of persons is male and female, and it's expressed in the complementarity of man and woman. Sixth, we're created with responsibility. The human person is created in a state of becoming. I think we have this mindset that God just plopped Adam and Eve in the garden and said, "All right, that's it. just enjoy, right? But he created them with a task, which was to cooperate in his act of creation and to till the garden and to keep it, to bring all of creation into praise of the Creator. In other words, they were in a state of development and they had a responsibility. Our dignity is both a gift and a task. It is a gift to receive and it is a task to fulfill. Other animals have no need to become what they are. We have to become what we are. We have a task, we have a gift and a task. We have to become what we are. Other animals don't have that. Left to itself, a dog will be a dog. At the end of the day, he doesn't rebuke himself for being a bad dog to other dogs. He doesn't lament or worry about dogs' undogginess to dog. We, however, have to become what we are. And I mean, who am I talking? I'm talking to teachers. You're constantly reminding your students of this, right? Your frustration with them is not that they're misbehaving, but they're not behaving in a manner that is worthy of themselves. We're always aware that we have to live up to something. Okay, one last truth about who we are. You didn't really think that it was just going to be 6. It had to be 7. It had to be a biblical number, right? So the last thing, we're fallen and wounded. Our dignity has been betrayed by us. So these truths that we know about ourselves, about our human dignity, we experience these as damaged. We tend to reject our creatureliness and elbow the Creator out of the picture. We think that we have full autonomy. We don't act worthy of the image that we are. Imagine if in the morning you go into the bathroom and you look in the mirror and to brush your teeth and your image is doing something else. Your image is combing its hair. That would be a little disturbing. Well, God looks down in the world to see His image and we are acting contrary to Him. We tend to treat persons like objects and objects like persons. We fail in that personal dimension of who we are. We fail in the communal dimension of who we are. We isolate ourselves. We experience disharmony between body and soul, between man and woman. All of these things are effects of sin. These are the legacy of original sin. The human nature that we receive, that we have inherited, still possesses great dignity, but it is wounded. And so the defense and the promotion of that dignity demands greater effort. And it requires that we be aware of these wounds in responding to things that threaten our dignity. With that in mind, now let's turn to the challenges that are before us. And the first, artificial intelligence. Let's just recognize that nothing has determined modern life quite like technology. The printing press, the internal combustion engine, radio, television, the internet, the smartphone, and now AI. The struggle with technology is nothing new, and the Pope's remarks express the challenge. This, the challenge of AI, leads inevitably to deeper questions about the nature of human beings. It's exactly right. If we engage this new technology without an awareness of who we are and without asking those deeper questions, then we'll be misused by that. About the nature of the human beings, about our distinctiveness and the future of the species, Homo sapiens, in the age of artificial intelligence. How can we remain fully human and guide this cultural transformation to serve a good purpose? How do we interact with technology in a way that both respects and promotes the truth of our human dignity? In fact, the struggle with technology goes back a whole lot further. This guy, Plato, he had reservations about the latest technology in his day, which was writing. So in his dialogue, The Phaedrus, he imagines a conversation between a king and the god of invention, who has introduced this newfangled thing called writing. The king, really Plato, isn't enthused. I know I'm violating PowerPoints with a power paragraph, but this is too much fun to omit. So the king, really this is Plato, says, "This discovery of yours will create forgetfulness in the learners' souls, because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember of themselves. What you have discovered is an aid not to memory, but to reminiscence. And you give your disciples not truth, but only the semblance of truth. They will be hearers of many things and will have learned nothing. They will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality." Just to clarify, he's talking about writing, not social media. Okay? But it's kind of consoling, isn't it, to realize that long ago people were concerned about how these things will affect us. There's another point that Plato makes that is more important. The parent or inventor of an art is not always the best judge of the utility or inutility of his own invention to the users of them. It's a very interesting observation. In other words, we're not always aware of how our inventions impact us until it happens. You may have heard the story of the inventor of the like button on Facebook. This is in the movie The Social Dilemma a couple years ago. He thought it would just be like this nice, playful thing. You could just put like and be so much fun. And of course, we know that it leads to anxiety, right? Middle school and high school girls especially, I think, are just concerned who likes it and who, and more to the point, do I have more likes than the other person? He wasn't aware of how this would impact people. Now, spoiler alert, Plato lost. Okay, writing won. But Plato's point remains, technology changes us, and we can be very slow to realize that. Technology is never neutral. It is morally neutral. There's nothing morally wrong with objects or tools or instruments or whatever else. But technology isn't neutral in the sense that any piece of technology has an effect on us. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. That's not my quote. I don't have an attribution because it's disputed. Anyway, our tools have an effect on how we think and act and interact. The printing press, the train, car, radio, TV, computer, cell phone, smartphone, they've all changed us and how we see ourselves and how we interact with one another. That's not to condemn them, it's just to recognize the reality. The danger of our own inventions has been a constant theme in culture over the past 200 years. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? About Victor Frankenstein's creation that becomes a homicidal monster. Another book, How Green Was My Valley, about the consuming power of the coal mines. Brave New World, about the inhumanity of an entirely planned society. Space Odyssey 2001, about the spaceship that rebels against its pilot. Terminator, about Skynet, which goes out of control and leads to machines, specifically Arnold Schwarzenegger, coming after us. And of course, the iPhone, the most dangerous of all. Now, we're concerned that our creations and inventions will get out of control and take over and consume us. And that's the panic about AI as well. I don't think that's actually the right concern. think the right concern is not that AI will suddenly become sentient and a person. The danger is rather that we will become like AI. So let's go back to Frankenstein. Because the real point of the novel isn't that Victor Frankenstein loses his control of his creature who wreaks havoc upon his life. It's that Victor Frankenstein becomes like his creature. There's one scene in the novel, I think it's the pivotal scene, where the monster says to him, "You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey." Kind of sounds like your cell phone, doesn't it? The rest of the novel is Victor Frankenstein pursuing the monster violently throughout the world, and in the process becoming less than human, in effect, a monster himself. "You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." That captures the real concern about our technology. What effect will it have on us? Not so much what will it become, but what will we become? And what will teaching become? And what will the relationship, that personal relationship between student and teacher become? And what will the conveying of truth become? And how is the image and likeness of the human person enhanced and made better known in the world by way of the technology? What does this all mean about AI? Well, it's already here. Your students have already been using it, and probably not just to check their research, right? I suspect priests have been using it as well, which is why you've seen a sudden improvement in homilies at Sunday Mass. Right? No? How will AI be used? How do we use this without being used by it? How do we use this tool without becoming like it? So again, Pope Francis, it's not simply a matter of making machines appear more human, which is kind of the constant desire and fear at the same time, but of awakening humanity from the slumber induced by the illusion of omnipotence. In other words, not wanting to be a creature anymore, based on the belief that we are completely autonomous and self-referential subjects, detached from all social bonds and forgetful of our status as creatures. So the 6 points I listed earlier, hope can provide criteria for AI and honestly for any technology. In using it, do we understand ourselves as creatures, or as the Pope indicates, are we developing too great a sense of our own autonomy? Do we become self-referential? Will AI help us to know and love what is good, true, and beautiful, or will it just become a means of manipulation of the environment around us? Does our use of it enhance our image and likeness, or does it make us more earthbound? Does AI help us develop as persons, or is it just about efficiency? How will we preserve a sense of our own embodiedness if we spend more and more time in a digital world? Now, none of these is a condemnation, but just a necessary question and a caution. Which brings us to another challenge for today, which is transgender ideology. This issue is similar in that it impacts how we know and experience ourselves as embodied persons and as the image and likeness of God and in relationship with one another. But it's a much more sensitive topic than AI, precisely because AI isn't a person. And this issue involves persons and becomes quickly very personal. And there's no one here this morning who hasn't been impacted by this issue personally, to some degree or another. So how do we respond, especially in the school? Well, in keeping with our human dignity, our response to this must be in accord with the truth of the human person. So, in keeping with that truth and dignity, we respect the personal. In personal terms, this means students who might suffer gender dysphoria, that psychological condition in which someone comes to feel that his or her emotional and or psychological identity does not match his or her biological sex, and as a result experiences clinically significant distress. It's a person who struggles, not a thing and not an idea. And a student in that situation must always be treated with respect and charity. What further complicates this issue is that, as Pope Francis has repeatedly noted, there's an ideology that comes with it. Disharmony between body and soul is nothing new. What is new is the ideology we find in politics, we find even in medicine and sociology and the psychological sciences and so on, the ideology that affirms this disharmony as normative and even good. And that's a disservice to the person who is struggling with it. Again, disharmony between body and soul is nothing new. It's one of original sin's deepest wounds, and we all experience it to one degree or another. Remember, Adam and Eve covered themselves with fig leaves because they were no longer comfortable in their own skin. A sign from the beginning, immediately after original sin, a sign that our bodies and our souls were no longer in the harmony that God had intended for them. Which means that Catholic teaching has a way of understanding and of addressing this wound. The conflict between body and soul is not new to us. It's something that we are aware of and have a way of understanding and addressing. In keeping with human dignity, we are also faithful to the truth, because we're created to know and to live the truth. In addressing both the person who's struggling and the ideology, we have to adhere to the truth about who we are, which is body and soul together as one. These two, the person and the truth, are often set at odds. Our dignity depends on their being meant for one another. Catholic truth is meant for the fulfillment of the human person and the enhancing of their human dignity. And the human person is meant for the receiving of that truth. It's no service to the person to withhold the truth, and it's no service of the truth to neglect the person. As Pope Francis makes clear, this reverence for our created nature and our received body is essential for knowing our place in creation and among others. These next two quotes are from Laudato Si', his document on the environment. The acceptance of our bodies as God's gift is vital for welcoming and accepting the entire world as a gift from the Father and our common home. It's a wonderful statement there. If we want to respect creation and our common home, as Pope Francis calls it, then we need to first have that reverence and respect for accepting our own bodies. Whereas thinking that we enjoy absolute power over our own bodies turns often subtly into thinking that we enjoy absolute power over creation. Perhaps the reverse is true as well. We dominate creation, and then we think because we're part of creation, then we can turn that back on ourselves and change ourselves in every way. Learning to accept our body, to care for it, and to respect its fullest meaning is an essential element of any genuine human ecology. And that phrase, human ecology, is one that he borrows from his predecessor, Pope Benedict. Absolute power over our bodies, even to change our sex by way of chemicals or surgery, leads to a similar view of the world. And then in our relationships, also valuing one's own body in its femininity or masculinity is necessary if I am going to be able to recognize myself in an encounter with someone who is different. We're always encountering people who are different. The primordial encounter of different persons is Adam and Eve, but they don't see that difference as conflict. And so that acceptance of femininity and masculinity in our bodies is essential for learning how to accept the other as other. In this way, we can joyfully accept the specific gifts of another man or woman, the work of God the Creator, and find mutual enrichment. Being a person requires also this acceptance of our created nature, of the sex we received at conception. Children need to be affirmed in their goodness, in the goodness of their created being, including their sexuality. Especially in middle school and high school when everything seems to go sideways, right? A young woman needs to hear that it is good that she is a young woman. It is good that she's female. And a young man needs to hear that it's good that he is a man, that he is male. These things are not in competition or conflict with one another. In fact, man and woman, and the person and the truth, are made for and depend on one another. Those are two significant challenges to our human dignity, AI and transgender ideology. I've just given a thumbnail sketch of them. The breakout sessions will be more to discuss at that time. I'd like to conclude by talking about an opportunity as regards human dignity, and one that we're making the most of, one way we're already revering human dignity in our schools. Charles de Gaulle, by all accounts, a very impressive man. He was a World War I hero. Something that gives us a sense of his character is that his peers in World War I nicknamed him the Constable, which was the title of France's commander-in-chief in the Middle Ages. He was a highly respected military commander at the outbreak of the Second World War, but unlike his mentor and other veterans of the First World War, he refused to surrender to the Nazis. So he fled to England and established a government in exile. Before the German invasion, one last act of the official French government was to find him guilty of treason and sentence him to death. It was meaningless because he was already in London at that point. And then after the war, he was France's indispensable man, served as prime minister and later as president. So yes, by all accounts, an impressive man, but also apparently a difficult man. I mean, he had the kind of personality that you have to have if you are going to, well, defy your government, risk treason and execution, and oppose the Nazis from exile. But Charles de Gaulle had another title, Anne's father. Anne was born in 1928 with Down syndrome. Society at the time didn't dedicate resources to helping people with disabilities, aside, of course, from the Catholic Church's women religious. De Gaulle and his family certainly had the financial means to have someone else take care of her. They didn't do that. She was part of the family. And she was certainly a gift to de Gaulle and something of a foil to his intensity, someone to gentle his condition. It's said that his troops feared him because he was so intense, and that they didn't know what to make of it when they saw him with her, because he suddenly became so gentle and caring. What a great witness to human dignity. Not that he thought of it that way, he was just caring for his daughter. So here's a witness that we're giving to human dignity. What some schools call the options program and others call expanded services, whatever the name. I mean the efforts that our schools are making, not just to support students with disabilities, but to incorporate them into the life of the school. And it's not just that students with disabilities are incorporated into the lives of the school, it's also that by way of that, our schools are imbued with this respect for the dignity of the human person. The truth is that each human being, regardless of their vulnerabilities, receives his or her dignity from the sole fact of being willed and loved by God. Thus, every effort should be made to encourage the inclusion and active participation of those who are affected by frailty or disability in the life of society and of the church. There's a wonderful story about Mother Teresa and one of her benefactors. It was a man who had built a home for children with disabilities for her sisters to care for the children there. And he himself had a child with special needs. So Mother Teresa, once the house was complete and was dedicated, Mother Teresa said to him, "Your child will be the first resident." And he rather boldly contradicted Mother Teresa. "No, Mother," he said, "my home is a school of love, and my child is the teacher." There's a similar opportunity in our schools to welcome those with disabilities, not only as a service to them, but also because by providing that kind of service, well, that gentles our condition. It keeps us from thinking that the most important thing is the transcript, or the resume, or the college, or the salary. It calls attention to our inherent dignity that we cannot create and that nobody can take away. Those children are an embodied presence that demands our reverence, and they in turn make us aware of our dignity. So let's return to Bishop Gottwald, erstwhile apostolic administrator of St. Louis. I haven't forgotten about him. We left him sitting in front of protesters, the poor guy, casting about for a response to those made anxious by all the changes in the world. How did he respond? What did he say to them? His answer was both simple and profound. He said, "I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived of the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary," and so on. You know the rest, right? He proclaimed the Apostles' Creed, the ancient expression of the Church's faith. What they thought was outdated and irrelevant, he knew was timely because it is timeless. In an era of confusion, change, and uncertainty, he found firm footing in the faith that he had received as a child. And that speaks to us. We are in a similar time of change, confusion, uncertainty, and fear. It's tempting to cast about for new solutions, to find the latest thing that will solve all our problems. But our response should be as simple and as profound as Bishop Gottwald's. A confident rearticulation of the Catholic faith that is suited to and applied to the current situation and challenges. Our faith is always timely because it is timeless. Faith in the Son of God, who became one of us. And that is the greatest tribute ever given to our human dignity. He did not scorn, but assumed our human nature. So may we also revere the dignity in each person. Thank you. God bless.